Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. The acoustics in this place are phenomenal. I had forgotten about that about the time my grandpa would bring me here. Thank you all for being here today. And I know I had this entire ceremony to prepare for the eulogy, but I realized I think I left it in the car. Wait. Oh, no, wait a second. It's everyone knows. Okay, here it is. Grandpa Bob was famous for this habit. I think it's an old farmer practice. Today, what we call a life hack for storing all kinds of documents and items in the space between his button-up shirt and his dress shirt. Maybe it was his checkbook. It could be the newspaper, a set of gloves. And if you spent enough time with Grandpa Bob, you would see him with the button-up shirt and the undershirt. Robert Leroy Watts was my grandfather. I got my middle name from him and my first name from my other grandfather. So my name's Samuel Robert Segrist. I'm his first grandson, born to his oldest daughter, Carol Ann Watts, and Samuel W. Segrist. My sister and some of our southern relatives call me Sam Bob, which I always liked because it reminded me of Grandpa Bob. They called my brother Mark, they called him Mark Bob, and we called her Katie Bob. So Bob. There's an old saying about speed that, it can be quicker than you can say Bob's your uncle, but when I think about Grandpa Bob, I think it's pretty quick to say Bob's my grandpa. And his influence on me has been incalculable. One way I know this is because about 10 years ago, I was on a first date, and my date said, this is going to sound like a strange question to ask. And I said, well, ask it. And she said, did you spend a lot of time with your grandparents growing up? I said, well, yeah, my paternal grandparents lived across the alley from us, and Bob and Lela, they would drive to see us, 3 or 4 times a year, and we'd go to see them. I'm like, why are you asking? She's like, oh, you just have a very grandfatherly way about it. Keep in mind, I was in my early 30s, and I thought, okay, does this mean no smooch tonight? She says, not necessarily, but don't bring up that you like Lawrence Welk. So this is about what I learned from Grandpa Bob. The first is wisdom. Anyone who knows Grandpa Bob is that he was a mountain of knowledge, encyclopedic memory. He had so many sayings. I think he'd approve of how I look today because he once told me that a man with a tuxedo is guaranteed 2 dates a year, and that's borne out pretty well. For all of his grandchildren, he really wanted to stress, and for his children, how important education was. So for every birthday, he gave me a book. For every Christmas, he gave me a book. If I was visiting him, he gave me a book. He was a wonderful storyteller who introduced me to other storytellers like Garrison Keillor. His knowledge and love of learning was evidenced in his membership in the Torch Club, and he ended up recruiting me for that great social and academic club. I was honored that I got to help him see through a couple of his creative projects where he would share who his 20 heroes were, his 26 expressions and adages like never buy a pig in a poke, or you can't tell from looking at a bullfrog how high he'll jump. So when I think about Grandpa Bob, some of the wisdom I learned is that the point of life is to make you better, not bitter. And when I think about the losses he experienced in his life, and that for everyone here who knew him, saw his approach to life, the smile that he would have, the way he would laugh, that he had a way of dealing with the eventual hardships of life that was very inspirational. And I think in these uncertain times, the wisdom that he imparted to us was how to handle those difficulties with grace. The second thing I learned from my grandfather was the value of family. Now, 50 years ago, my mother was 16, and she wanted to see a movie that everyone was talking about, which was Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather. My grandfather, in his wisdom then, would not let her go see it. My mom said, "It's because of too much language." And it's like, "Oh, there's some language." "It's because of too much sex." And he's like, "No, it's not because of that. It's because of the violence." And he said, "Yeah, I'm not letting you see it because of the violence." But if he had seen it, and I don't know if he ever did, I think he would approve of the Godfather, Vito Corleone, who in one scene asks his godson, "Do you spend time with your family?" He says, "Yes, Godfather." He said, "Good, because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man." A real man. Well, by that measure, I'd have to say that Bob Watts was the realest man I've ever met, because he cared about his family so much, and I can see it in the effect he's had on his 10 grandchildren, including Leslie, the stepdaughter of his daughter Julie. And for that, I am grateful. And that brings me to the third thing I learned from my grandpa, Bob, which is to live a life of gratitude. He was thankful for so much in his life. He once told me he was one of the luckiest men alive, and so grateful that he had 3 loves in his life. His wife, Lela, who they had 6 children. Then Sandy Freeland, who we call Grandma Sandy, and Glenda. I'm grateful that in the last few years of my grandfather's life that he had a companion, that they were 2 peas in a pod. They got to spend seemingly every day together. Anytime I would call, he was like, "Sammy, we're just about to watch the PBS News Hour," or like, "We're on our way to the Des Moines Symphony." And so I'm just so grateful that they got to spend so much time together. And their last trip together was to Maine to see my brother Mark and his wife Angela and their 2 boys, and they're expecting a daughter any day now. So I'm grateful that she got to hear Grandpa's voice and feel that presence. So I'm also grateful that at the end he was surrounded by people who loved him so much. His brother Ronnie, his daughters Mary and Carol, Glenda and me. And so I know he was also grateful that he died with a Democrat in the White House. Because when he would take me to the subway over here, the manager of the subway would say, "Hey, Governor." I said, "Why does he call you Governor?" It's like, and the manager said, "Because Bob will talk about politics to anyone, and I swear he's running for office." Bob Watts would have gotten my vote. So I'm going, as I'm wrapping this up, I just want to say some things I'm grateful for. Some of my favorite memories of him is how he taught me that old stuff can be really cool. Garrison Keillor, the Marx Brothers, NPR. I think all of his grandchildren listen to NPR because of him. In college, he was a model for intergenerational collegiality, because he would visit my college roommates and I and bring his sleeping bag. When it's time for him to go to bed, even if we had a party going on, he was sleeping on the landing outside my bedroom. So he fit right in there. He was a cool dude. I'm grateful I got to see him boogie on the dance floor at my brother's wedding to Daft Punk's Get Lucky. And recently, another wise thing he told me is, you can't worry and dance at the same time, which I've found to be true. So the day after he passed, I was driving back, going west on I-80, and I was listening to some music that a friend of mine had given me to comfort me during difficult times. And the stereo, for some reason, the volume knob started to turn. Well, not the knob, but the volume numbers digitally. It was going way, 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 way loud. And I was like, whoa. And it was right during a moment when I was thinking about Grandpa Bob, during the most beautiful piece of music. And in that moment, I turned it down, and I thought, maybe Grandpa Bob's trying to talk to me. He's saying, hey, Sammy, I'm in heaven, and the reception ain't so good up here, so turn it up, son, turn it up. And yeah, when I think about his life, his accomplishments, how he lived his life on his own terms, he got to stay in the apartment he loved. He was so active, just always going out, meeting people, talking to people, doing things. I see that the way he lived his life was a great model for us and to a good, full life. And most of all, when we think about his quirks and eccentricities, it all comes in some way in service of his love of family. And when I think of the life of this lovable farm boy from Missouri, with his heart of gold and the brain of a scholar, I realize how blessed we all were to have known him. You can't tell by looking at a bullfrog how high he'll jump. I guess the same is about Grandpa Bob. His light lives on in us. I love and miss you, Grandpa Bob, and I always will. So, last little bit of wisdom. When I think about Grandpa Bob and what he valued in life, and he used to, after a good meal, he would sit back and his belly was a little like mine, and he would pat it and say, that's my fortune. So I think one way to honor him and just think about how good it is to be alive. The next time you have a really good meal and your stomach is full, you can pat your belly, think of Bob Watts with his smile and his laugh and say, that's my fortune. Thank you all for being here today.